Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, welcome back. And we just go around the room and introduce ourselves. My name is Grisha.
Francesco.
I'm Len.
I'm George.
I'm Joe.
I'm David.
Michael.
Prasad Chan.
Mark.
Yes.
Michael.
My name is Cass.
Jack.
I'm Brad.
My name is Ray.
I'm Clint.
Jeff. I'm Jim.
Michael.
Don.
My name is Michael.
I'm Hal.
Kevin.
My name is Brian.
Peter. Tom.
I'm John.
My name is David.
My name is Val.
Thanks everyone, and let's make sure we welcome Frank during the break and any other newcomers or people that came in late. So now I'm happy to introduce David Lewis. David Lewis has been following the Dharma path for over 40 years and has a degree in comparative religious studies. He started out in the Tibetan Shambhala tradition and has been practicing Vipassana meditation since moving to San Francisco over 25 years ago. For the past 7 years, he's been practicing intensively. David is a member of the Mission Dharma Sangha, where he teaches an introduction to insight meditation class. He is a longtime member of the Gay Buddhist Fellowship and also leads a weekly sitting group for seniors every Friday morning. David is a graduate of Spirit Rock Meditation Center's Dedicated Practitioners Program and has been on the teaching team for Spirit Rock retreats.
Thank you. Good morning. It's lovely, as always, to be here with my Dharma brothers. I have been, the last 2 times I have been here speaking over the last couple of months, I've been talking about the Paramis, or Paramitas. So this is a mini-series of talks, and today is the final one. The Paramis are that's a Sanskrit word, or excuse me, Paramita is Sanskrit, Parami is the Pali word, are often translated as the 10 perfections, and they're basically virtues that we can cultivate. And you'll recognize them because they're most of them are fairly universal across religions and belief systems. They are the 10. For those of you that haven't been here in the past: generosity, morality or virtue, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolve or determination, kindness, and equanimity. So, as I said, these are virtues that we can cultivate. These are practices that we can cultivate as Buddhists, or even if we're not Buddhists, completely outside of meditation. Meditation supports all of them, but I think a lot of times we think of our practice, and we talk about practice within Buddhism as being about meditation, and it's really a great deal more than that. Another way to think about the 10 perfections, especially from a Buddhist perspective, is it's a way of purifying your karma. It's a way of becoming a better person, being more skillful in our thoughts and actions, and they're doorways to happiness. So unlike some belief systems and some religions where the virtue is something that's imposed or you're told how to behave and it's about other people, in our tradition it's more about opening doors to happiness. If you want to be happy, if you want to be free, these are various ways of cultivating that, in addition to a meditation practice, which the Buddha always recommended. And in case I forget to say it at the end, I'm going to say it at the beginning, it seems a little overwhelming. This is the third talk about 10 perfections, and you think, that's an awful lot to remember, and how can I do all of this? You don't have to tackle them all at once. I certainly found in my life that they individually speak to me at different times of my life. Last year I spent a lot of time cultivating metta, doing metta practice. And just going through the list as I've been studying and preparing to talk about them, I'm thinking, wow, truthfulness, it's one of the ones today, is something that I could give a lot of attention to. So you can pick one or the other, whatever speaks to you, and make that your practice for a while, as long as you want. A few days, a few weeks, a couple of years. So the 4 that I've not yet talked about, and I'm going to try to get to if I have time today, are truthfulness, resolve, kindness, and equanimity. Truthfulness is, that's one of the universal ones you hear in all philosophical systems, all belief systems. Most religions say it's good to tell the truth. In the Buddha's teaching, it has 2 focuses or 2 meanings. One is the one that we're most familiar with, which is that the truth, telling the truth, is an aspect of morality. It's an element of right speech, which is one of the factors on the Eightfold Path, and it's one of the precepts. But the Buddha also taught that truth, or truthfulness, is a matter of right perception. It's a matter of seeing things clearly, without distortion. It's the opposite of delusion. So it's the way we actually see things and understand the world. And that can be a little bit more of a challenge, because we tend to have assumptions and prejudices and conditioning and ways that we view the world that seem very real for us, because it's mine. This is the way this is what I've learned. But if we really carefully investigate it, it might not be true. So getting back to the first use of truthfulness as an aspect of virtue and as an element of right speech, I think you've probably heard before that there are 4 suggestions, or you might say rules, for right speech. Right speech being an important factor of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. And the 4 rules are that before you say anything, stop and consider for a moment whether it's timely, whether this is a good time to be saying whatever you're saying. Is it true? Is it kind? And is it beneficial? Beneficial meaning, does it come from goodwill? So, if you've ever played with this, as I have, stopping to think for a moment whether something I'm saying is timely to someone, is timely, true, kind, and beneficial, very often that shuts me right up. When I really reflect on truthfulness and those 4 suggestions, very often my response is to hold back. That excludes hate speech, gossip, rumor. The Buddha even said idle chatter. Watch out for it. So that's truth as an aspect of virtue or morality, and that's a practice that we can do. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that practice. Joseph Goldstein is a teacher that I have a lot of admiration for, said that one practice he did with right speech for a year is he made a point of never talking about anybody unless they were present. So imagine what a challenge that would be. So the other aspect of truth is truth is right perception. And that's a variety of clear seeing, or the Pali word is sakaya ditti, is seeing things as they are, seeing very clearly, with a mind free of distortion, tunnel vision, blind spots, and prejudices. So in order to do that, you have to know what your blind spots are. You have to know what your prejudices are, and you have to know that you are prejudiced. We all have preferences, and those preferences can become prejudices, and generally we're not particularly cognizant of that. It requires a careful checking out of thoughts, attitudes, stories, and biases through introspection and our meditation practice. So this is one of the ways that our meditation practice supports the investigation and the cultivation of the paramis. Is in meditation we see this stuff come up. We see our prejudices come up, and if we can acknowledge that without being judgmental, that might be an opportunity for changing it, if it's something that it would be skillful to change. It's a distinguishing of our assumptions and wishes from the way things really are, different things. It's useful to have a teacher or good dharma friends to help you with this. Sometimes it's good to have a mirror when we're dealing with our assumptions and our prejudices. Carol Newhouse was here last week, 2 weeks ago, last week, and talking about teachers. And I wanted to put my hand up and say what my teachers have been most useful for in my practice is calling me on my stuff and pointing out that my prejudices were present when I wasn't seeing them, and getting me to push the boundaries a little bit of the way I see the world. There's a teacher and writer named Byron Katie you might be familiar with, who's really wonderful. And her rule of thumb for this question of truthfulness is to constantly be asking yourself the question, is this true? And then follow that up with, is this really true? When I do that, if I'm questioning an assumption or a belief or an opinion, the first question, is this true? I'll think, oh yeah, well sure it's true. It's mine. I just came up with it. But if I ask it again, is this really true? And doing a little investigation, I'll think, well, no, maybe not. Maybe this is a prejudice. Maybe this isn't true for somebody else. Maybe this isn't absolute truth. It's a good question. So why are we less than truthful? Why don't we speak the truth all the time? I think it's to avoid pain. We want people to like us. We don't want people to criticize us. We don't want to be judged or criticized. The Buddha talks about the 8 worldly winds that batter us and blow us through life, and are the motivation for a lot of our reactive patterns. And the 8 worldly winds are praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and shame, happiness and despair. So if you think about it, how many of your reactions and your beliefs and your relationships with people are often guided by fame and blame? It's I don't want to be blamed. I want to be well thought of. Gain and loss, fame and shame, happiness and despair. I want to be happy. I don't want to be unhappy. These conditions, the worldly winds, are always blowing. They're always battering us, and we can't control them for the most part. We can't control what other people think of us. But we think we do. We think we can, and we invest a lot of energy in it. So one aspect of this is social media, where we present ourselves in the best light. And I notice that when I'm always interested in what my friends and acquaintances are posting about their lives on Facebook. And lately I've been noticing it's a little depressing sometimes because I think everybody's got a better life than I do. They eat better food, they go to interesting places, but that's the stuff. That's the way we present ourselves in social media. That's how we present ourselves in real life when we're talking to our friends. So it's interesting to question that and to ask the question: is this whatever I'm saying or presenting myself? Is this timely? Is this true? Is this kind? Is this beneficial? Whenever I hear my introduction, as it's written out, which I gave to GBF a long time ago, it makes me cringe. Because one of the things it says is that I've been practicing for 40 years, practicing meditation in the Buddhist tradition. And while that's true, it's also true that I have not been practicing for 40 years. There have been long periods where I haven't sat every day, haven't meditated. There have been years when I haven't gone to retreats. There are times when I practice more intensively and less intensively, and times when I was just kind of deluded and detached and out of it and doing other things in my life. There are times when I got busy with work or relationships or going to bars. So that's not the whole truth that I've been practicing Buddhism for 40 years. That makes me sound like a wise person. I'm just an ordinary yogi like the rest of you. It's a little bit more of the truth. So the truth is always more complicated than how we present it. So it's just something to be mindful of. The next parami that I want to talk about is resolve or determination. Those are two different definitions. Buddhism is practice. And you probably say this almost every time I get up here, but it's because I think it's so important to know, to remind ourselves that the Buddha taught a practice. He did not teach a dogma or a belief system. There's no getting it in Buddhism. There's practice. It's seeing clearly. And the way we do that in this system is not so much by learning and studying, it's through the direct experience. I want to read a quote from Ajahn Sucitto, who's an English monastic, about direct experience. The Buddhist emphasis on knowing through one's direct experience has always felt very sane to me. The Buddha's Dhamma is shown not through this is the truth, this is ultimate reality, this is the secret law of the cosmos, but as this is the way you get through this mess. And it offers an opportunity, a way to explore the mind and step back from the samsara of its turmoil through the simple expedient of picking up a reasonable intention, like focusing on the breathing, and witnessing how the mind skids and wobbles around that intention with transient likes and dislikes. So did anybody notice their mind skidding and wobbling during meditation this morning? And maybe likes and dislikes arising. That's what's supposed to happen in meditation. That's not a mistake. Noticing that is what we're supposed to be doing. And the more we notice it, and the more we can watch the skids and wobbles without judgment, the more we're able to develop some equanimity, which I'll be talking about in a few minutes. So, because we learn through direct experience, every moment is an opportunity for awakening. And likewise, every moment is an opportunity for losing ourselves in delusion. We have a choice, whether we're paying attention or not, whether we're being mindful. Every moment's an opportunity. Undertaking this practice of paying attention, of being mindful, whether we're meditating or not, undertaking this practice whether it's we're talking about meditation or working with the paramis, takes resolve and determination. It's like any other thing that we practice. Going to the gym, learning how to play the clarinet, cooking a new recipe. It takes a certain amount of determination. We have to decide. It takes, first of all, intention, which is a very important starting point in karma and in Buddhist practice. Then determination, and then energy, which is another one of the paramis that I talked about a month ago. Anything we want to do takes intention, determination, and energy. So it's a bit of work. Overcoming lifelong habits and mental addictions, and for that matter, physical addictions, is not easy. And personal transformation does not happen quickly or with little effort. It takes resolve, and it takes energy, as I said. So resolve is an important parami. Real true transformation, real true spiritual practice takes some effort. We have to push our boundaries, step outside of the box, and that takes a certain amount of courage. Right resolve is closely related to right intention, and right intention is the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a wisdom factor. So this is a step in cultivation of wisdom as opposed to concentration. So as a wisdom factor and as a practice, one of the several definitions of right resolve that the Buddha offered were these three elements. Renunciation, which I talked about in my first talk about paramis. Renunciation is a parami of itself. Freedom from ill will, which is metta, or goodwill. And non-harming, which is one of the fundamental precepts. So you could practice right resolve just by focusing on those three. Right renunciation, I've already talked about, but I just want to come back to it briefly. Because somebody came up to me after my talk on right renunciation, the first parami talk, and said, I wish there was another word for that. It pushes buttons in Western culture. But renunciation is just a fundamental practice in Buddhism, because this practice is more about letting go of things than getting things. We're used to, in our way of learning and in our culture, to approach learning as I'm going to get something. Somebody's going to give me something. I'm going to learn. I'm going to get the secret teaching, and then I'm going to know. There's no secret teachings. In Buddhism, it's about letting go of things. Letting go of what gets in the way of happiness. Letting go of what gets in the way of freedom. Just sitting down and meditating is a practice for renunciation. It's okay. I'm going to let go of sensory input. I'm going to shut my eyes. I'm going to not cling to thoughts. I'm not going to push away unpleasant thoughts, and I'm not going to cling to pleasant thoughts or feelings or emotions. That's renunciation. Freedom from ill will, or metta, is another aspect of right resolve. And that's the next parami that I'm going to talk about, so I'll get to that in a moment. And non-harming is one of the precepts. That's another one of those universal things across, to the best of my knowledge, all belief systems, all religions, that non-harming is fundamental. So feel free, if you want to practice, choose to practice with right resolve, to work with those three or any one of them. Non-harming can be a powerful practice all by itself for the rest of our lives. Metta. Metta is the next parami, the next skillful cultivation. And this is one that I think is universally loved. I know we've talked about it a lot, and you've heard a lot of talks about metta at GBF. For those of you that haven't, definitions of metta are loving kindness, often used, goodwill. The one I like that I heard a teacher use once is unconditional friendliness. Talking about unconditional friendliness kind of takes the weight off having to love everything. It's not always easy to love everybody and everything. But we can be open to everything. We can be unconditionally friendly. Like, okay, I'll give them a chance. Or I'll give this idea a chance. I have a couple of quotes also that I want to read about metta. First one is from Gil Fronsdal, who's a local teacher. He has a meditation center in Redwood City. Metta practice is the cultivation of our capacity for loving kindness. It does not involve either positive thinking or the imposition of an artificial positive attitude. There is no need to feel loving or kind during metta practice. Rather, we meditate on our good intentions, however weak or strong they may be, and water the seeds of these intentions. When we water wholesome intentions instead of expressing unwholesome ones, we develop those wholesome tendencies within us. So that takes us back to this idea of intention as being the beginning of everything in our practice. Beginning of change, the beginning of transformation, the beginning of awakening. We don't have to be perfect receptacles of love or perfect generators of love. We just have to have the intention to be more loving in our lives. The foundational practice of metta is loving yourself. And the Buddha said, you can search throughout the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself, and that person is not to be found anywhere. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. So in metta practice, some of you have done it. We do phrases about starting out with loving ourselves and then directing that love towards a benefactor or a friend that we can think of. And then moving on to a neutral person, and eventually sending metta to difficult people. And the way this practice was developed in the early Theravada tradition, it always suggested that we send metta to ourselves, that we love ourselves first, because that's the easiest. And a number of Asian teachers that have come and taught in the West, monastic teachers, have said that that's not the case with Westerners. And I've certainly noticed this myself, and often in my own experience, is that sometimes it's not so easy to love myself. It's much more easy to judge myself. Sometimes it's more easy to judge friends and benefactors than to love myself. So, if nothing else, notice who's easy to love, who's difficult to love. Sometimes the people that are most difficult to love are those that need it most. It's a practice. Another quote from the Buddha said, and this is about practice, abandon what is unskillful. One can abandon the unskillful. If it were not possible, I would not ask you to do it. If the abandoning of the unskillful would bring harm and suffering, I would not ask you to abandon it. But as it brings benefit and happiness, therefore I say, abandon what is unskillful, such as ill will, such as harming. Cultivate the good. One can cultivate the good. If it were not possible, I would not ask you to do it. If this cultivation were to bring harm and suffering, I would not ask you to do it. But as this cultivation brings benefit and happiness, I say, cultivate the good. So cultivation is practice. And this is how we can work with all of the paramis. We can cultivate them. They're all skillful. They're all good. They will all lead, as the Buddha said, to benefit and happiness. So, getting back to loving ourselves, an important part of loving ourselves is the ability to embrace everything, nothing left out. There's some wonderful Zen quotes about nothing left out. And that means embracing the parts of ourselves that we are uncomfortable with, embracing our trauma, embracing our bad habits. Not cultivating, but just realizing, like, okay, I've suffered some harm in my life, and sometimes that makes things difficult for me. And just recognizing what our habits are, what our karma is the beginning step is to changing them. So embracing all parts of ourselves with nothing left out is both a loving thing to do, and it's an aspect of truthfulness. What's really true? The whole package. The goal of the spiritual path, of our spiritual path, is to discover our own true nature, to connect with both ourselves and to connect with others, to see our own suffering, and that helps us empathize with the suffering of others. Brings compassion. Great fullness of being, which we experience as happiness, can be described as love. To be undivided and unfragmented, to be completely present, is to love. To pay attention is to love. This is practice. This is the practice and cultivation of love. So it's not off the mark to say this whole practice that we come here to do is about love. To pay attention is to love. Fundamentally, that's what meditation is paying attention without judgment to whatever's going on in the moment and allowing that. It's about love. That's what I love about my practice. It's such a beautiful thing. I get a little making myself verklempt. The final parami is equanimity. Equanimity is at the top of a lot of lists in Buddhism itself. It's a jhana. The word equanimity in English comes from the Latin equus, which means balanced, and animus, spirit. So balance is a very common definition. Balanced spirit, balanced mind, balanced internal state, mental calmness, evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. There's a couple of different Pali words. One is upekkha, which originally meant to look at or to perceive patiently, to perceive in a patient way. And another way of saying that is it's the ability to see without being caught up by what we see. The ability to see without getting caught up by what we see. If in your meditation practice, and this is something I recommend, if in your meditation practice you make an effort to not push away the unpleasant that arises in meditation and not grasp on to the pleasant that arises in meditation, then you're practicing equanimity. Whenever I give a talk on equanimity, I can't pronounce the word. So that's how we practice with it. That's how it shows up in our meditation practice and in real life. It's not pushing away the unpleasant and not grasping onto the pleasant. It's being comfortable with things as they are and recognizing we're not denying the unpleasant. We're recognizing that, okay, this moment might be unpleasant and its nature is to change. Or this moment is pleasant and its nature is to change. And I can accept that. I don't have to grasp it. Another Pali word is tatra majahatata, And the English translation is standing in the middle of all of this. And I think that's another really beautiful way of thinking about it that I like to keep in my consciousness, standing in the middle of this, especially when a bunch of stuff is going on that you don't like or is uncomfortable or life is difficult. You stand in the middle of it. I think in my last talk, or maybe the one before that, I talked about a monk that described this as standing underneath a waterfall of suffering. And you just stand under. You just stand. You can take it. It's not going to wash you away. It's not going to overwhelm you. It's impermanent. Standing in the middle of it. There's no such thing as perfection in life, and there's no such thing as stability. Everything changes. And we resist that. And we think there's such a thing as normal and such a thing as a stable life where our good relationships are going to last forever, and we're always going to be in our home, and our things are working out. We're always going to have our health. It's a delusion that we frequently swim in. I certainly do. I had a little health scare a month ago. It turned out to be no big deal, thankfully. But it really brought up mortality for me. And I saw myself going to this place of thinking, it's not supposed to be like this. I'm not supposed to get sick. It's a delusion. All beings, there's Buddha offered remembrances. It's suggested for every day that all beings that are subject to illness will become ill. And all beings that are subject to aging will age. And then they will die. And will be separated from all we love. And resisting that is a delusion that brings suffering to our lives. Equanimity is the pinnacle of the Brahma Viharas, which are the bright divine abodes. Loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. Each Brahma Vihara has phrases associated with it to use in cultivating the desired state. I talked about the meta phrases. It's also one of the factors of enlightenment. The phrases that we use in our merit blessing at the end of every meeting of GBF, there's various different ways of offering merit, but the basic phrases cover all four of the Brahma Viharas. May I be happy and have the causes of happiness. May I be free from suffering and all the causes of suffering. May I live in equanimity and with neither attachment nor aversion. May I live in loving kindness towards all. We can use those phrases for ourselves. We can use those phrases for anyone in our lives, for the person sitting next to you in this room, for all beings. May all beings be happy and have causes for happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and all the causes of suffering. May they live in equanimity and with neither attachment nor aversion. May all beings live with loving kindness for all. That's an intention, not a command. It's an intention and a best wish. It opens our hearts, cultivates love. So equanimity is both a practice and the outcome of practice. We practice it every time we meditate and strive to avoid clinging to pleasant objects or pushing away unpleasant objects. As an enlightenment factor exists in the absence of desire, aversion, and delusion. It's the absence of desire, aversion, and delusion, which is the beginning of awakening, the beginning of liberation. So, in a nutshell, those are the last four I actually got through it. I didn't think I would. The last 4 paramis. I could have given a whole talk about any one of them. I just want to go over the list again, in case then I'm going to open up to questions or comments or reflections on any of the paramis. Generosity, morality, renunciation, discernment, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolve or determination, kindness, and equanimity. They can all be practiced, one at a time, all together, as groups. Make them part of your practice, along with your meditation practice, instead of meditation practice, whatever works for you. If any of them speak to you, I encourage you to give it some attention. So thank you for your time and patience and attention in the last 3 talks that I've given. They're over now. If you're tired of this topic, we'll do something else. I'm curious if you have any reflections or comments or questions. Abe?
I was interested in you talking a little bit more about seeing things clearly. It seems to me there's so many reasons why we wouldn't see any situation or ourselves clearly. Our experience, our culture, our peers, our fears, our egos, everything contributes to us having kind of a distorted view of what's really going on. But it seems to me we need to see things clearly in order to make wise decisions, and take skillful action. So in the midst of a difficult decision, how can you cultivate seeing things clearly?
Well, sometimes it's a process of elimination, I think, that you describe so beautifully the forces in our lives that have made us what we are, our karma, our education, our upbringing, what we read, who we hang out with. Those are all forces that have made us who we are. And just recognizing those forces, which we do in therapy and we do in meditation. We recognize, like, oh, okay, I have family stuff that I don't particularly like. I've had this conversation so many times with my friends, and it's so true for me. Is I've got family stuff that I learned in early childhood that has made me what I am to a certain extent, that I don't particularly like, but it's not that easy to change. But just seeing it and knowing that it's my family stuff and my upbringing allows me to question it a little bit. One aspect for me is of that, for instance, is that I'm kind of an introvert, and so I gave myself that label that I'm an introvert, and that means that in all kinds of situations in my life, I thought, oh, I can't go do that because I'm an introvert. But that's not necessarily true. That's just my training. That's my karma. That's the way I was raised. That's the way I responded to life. But that's not necessarily true. So it's not a bad thing to question that. So I don't know if that helps. I think it's just recognizing what our stuff is without getting rid of it. So seeing clearly doesn't mean we get rid of all our stuff and that we're perfectly enlightened beings. It just means that we see our stuff.
I mean, even when you get advice from a friend or from a teacher, you have to question whether they're saying things.
As the Buddha recommended.
Is this about me or is this about them?
Yeah. As the Buddha recommended, is don't listen to teachers too much, or at least check it out in your direct experience. Like, okay, and the question is this true? Does this feel true? Sit with it for a while. See what your direct experience teaches you. Fundamentally, for me, the really fundamental truths of seeing clearly are: life is hard. There's suffering in this life. all the time. I'm always reacting to wanting more of what I like and less of what I don't like. Secondly, life's impermanent. Everything changes. And thirdly, it's not personal. It's my conditioning. It's what my family taught me that may or may not be true. It's not necessarily personal. That's seeing clearly. Or at least one way of looking at seeing clearly.
So I'm interested in investigating the relationship of one of the Brahma Viharas, which you talked about, which is certainly important to me, in an area which we often avoid, but is quite central to gay men, and that's sex. So it seems to me that equanimity and sex don't fit easily together. And in fact, you mentioned yourself lapses from practice or not practicing gay bars, relationships. And now there's the Buddha's advocacy of celibacy, as I understand it, and I wondered if it might be worthwhile to think about this a little bit further, since it probably arises for many of us.
Yeah, great topic, and something we can spend a lot of time on. For the very reasons that you're pointing out, the Buddha did advocate celibacy for monastics, not for lay people, but for monastics. And that was because it just complicates life like nothing else. There's no bigger button pusher. There's no more intense motivator of reactivity than being sexual beings. It's a powerful force. It could be powerfully good and it can be powerfully painful. And which is why the Buddha recommended for monastics celibacy, but he didn't do that for lay people. Lay people, you said, be very careful about. And in the precepts that we take to how we want to behave, it's not avoiding sex, but avoiding sexual misconduct.
So moderation.
Moderation, and that could include pornography or fantasies. So it's a big topic, but a really worthwhile one.
Yes, I love the series. Well, I love your talks. I appreciate that you mentioned Byron Katie, because there are four things that inquiry I think are very challenging. Is it true? How do you know it's true? What is this idea? How does it make you feel? And how would you feel without it?
Thank you. I truncated them, yes.
But I think they're worth doing, because a lot of us invite ideas that make us unhappy.
Yeah. And there's so much that, how could you live without it? That's renunciation. There's so much we can let go of that complicates our life and just adds suffering to our life. There's so much that we can let go of that simplifies and leads towards happiness. So it's getting back to renunciation.
Thank you, David. I too appreciate all your talks. And I appreciated today especially just being reminded about metta as being unconditional friendliness. You know, that one of my best, I think, meditation instructions was on one of those month-long Spirit Rock by Sylvia Borstein. He said, make a commitment to meet all of your experience, no matter what it is, as you would a friend, with kindness, curiosity.
No matter what comes up.
No matter what.
No. Or nothing left out, as I was trying to.
Yeah.
Suggest.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're out of time.
Oh, out of time. Well, I'm around afterwards. If anybody wants to chat.
So that's all the time we have right now. Announcements?
Next week is a small group scheduled. We had an ill-fated attempt at an all-day or an all-sangha day, which is very different than all-day. An all-sangha day will happen next Sunday instead of when we tried to do it last time. It was confluence of Mission Street. There's a lot of things. Anyway, it's a great chance to come and see the players behind the screen and how sort of all works, and appreciate all the things that GBF does. And it'll begin and end at the same time. It's not all day. People have asked me, how long does it last? It's all song they did. So,
That's 2 weeks from
Next week.
next Sunday.
Oh,
Next Sunday. So please come.
Is the schedule updated on the website? Because somebody mentioned to me that like today wasn't listed. Who updates that?
I do. It's probably not because we just put out the newsletter. Yeah.
Any other announcements?
Are you going to
I retreat?
You having a day long?
Oh yeah, I am. Sometime at the end of this month.
There it is, yeah.
We have evidence.
On June 27th, Saturday, which is Pride Weekend, I actually recognize later, but hopefully some people want to come. I'm doing something on the skandhas. Actually, the last time I was here speaking, I talked about them, and so it's not really going to be study as much as like using them as a way to do meditation. Yeah.
Skandhas?
Skandhas, form, feeling, thought, choice, and consciousness.
And where will this be?
What's that? Here.
Oh,
Yeah, here at 10 to 4. So it's like a meditation day.
Mark your calendar. I'm your host for the day, and there's hot water for tea, and please wash your cup at the end if you've used tea. There's a sign-up sheet over here to get on the mailing list and the listserv. There are treats, some healthier than others. There's actually some gluten-free trail mix bars and some strawberries and some of the ever-popular chocolate donut holes, which are their own reward. Some people choose to meet at the door around 12:30 to go out to lunch. Everyone is welcome. I will be going around with a dharma bowl, which is an expression of generosity. So let it flow freely. And I'm going to be doing it right away because I've got to get out of here and go to the opera. So loosen up your wallets right now. I think that's it.
Okay, any other announcements? Let's close.
This is a slightly different version of merit than what we usually do. Same idea. This is our intention. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the root of suffering. May they not be separated from the great happiness devoid of suffering. May they enjoy the great equanimity that is free from passion, aggression, and prejudice.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.